Welcome to the Travis Masterbone podcast. I am your host, Travis Masterbone, talking some shit to impact your life. This is episode 28, titled Missouri and the People's Republic of China. Quote, I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to science. Science has in many ways helped ease the suffering of this pandemic, which was more than likely caused by science. End quote. Left-wing commentator Jon Stewart of The Daily Show, comedian. He said this on The Late Night Show with Stephen Colbert, full-blown left-wing show as well. And at the time, this was a very controversial statement for John to make. He was getting really scrutinized by his side of the political spectrum. And rightfully so at the time, because this whole lab leak theory, which has made some headway thanks to Trump and company, updating the government website, confirming that this is from a lab. Now, we don't know 100% for sure if this lab leak theory is true, but my God, after this episode and maybe a couple more diving into the specifics on what the Trump administration released on the government website, I feel like we have good reason to lean towards the lab theory actually becoming true. And it's absolutely crazy because once upon a time, if you uttered words that even remotely question the origin of where the coronavirus came from, like Jon Stewart, you would be banned, shunned, and looked upon as a goddamn conspiracy theorist, all that crap. And so it's just really interesting how the tables have turned. And I'm sure people are going to be listening to this in my next episodes and say, well, that's not 100% sure. There's still a chance it came from a bat. You know, they're going to hold on to that. But in retrospect, back in the day when it was really, really in the prime of COVID, they were so 100% sure that it came from a bat. Now it's the opposite, and I will feel so good making these episodes, not worrying about being banned, and actually providing a lot of information that will make you question the Chinese Communist Party. And I really wanted to get into this ruling, this case that happened in Missouri. And of course, it's nowhere near any mainstream media outlets because, let's just face facts, anything that leans even slightly towards this lab leak theory being true and really highlighting how responsible China should be for the coronavirus, anything leaning in that direction, it really does make it impossible for the mainstream media to backpedal, because then they would have to admit that Trump was right because he was calling out China very, very early on. And remember, whatever the orange man bad does, that means they have to go against that. They dug their hole. And that's essentially what I'm going to kind of wrap up with on my overall take with this. But I really wanted to dive deep into this case and this ruling. It is very interesting, to say the least, and I say it's a very symbolic win, but I am going to say how the actions are going to take hold after the fact and what they're going to do about this ruling that went in favor for Missouri against the People's Republic of China. You know, that's going to be a whole nother story, and we'll just have to wait and see, but I'm here just to provide as much evidence as possible. You can pull up this entire case yourself. Missouri versus the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China, National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China, Ministry of Emergency Management of the People's Republic of China, Ministry of Civil Affairs of the People's Republic of China, People's Republic of Hubei Province, People's Government of Wuhan City, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So those are all the list of organizations of the defendant in this case. And basically, this is a lawsuit against the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, and other entities over specifically the COVID-19 pandemic. And it has really caught some traction recently. In March 2025, U.S. District Judge Stephen Limbo Jr. issued a default judgment in favor of Missouri, awarding the biggest judgment in Missouri history of $24.5 billion in damages. Yes, billion with a B. They found that the Chinese officials concealed and suppressed knowledge of the virus as early as September 2019, which allowed them to stockpile PPE, personal protective equipment, PPE, and then they restricted exports, and these are all actions that directly affected Missouri's healthcare system and economy. And so they came up with this giant number, billion with a B, in damages. And this is all going to be a judgment against overall the Republic of China. And so what did they do specifically? The Chinese officials concealed and suppressed knowledge of the virus during the early stages of the pandemic and then hoarding personal protective equipment. These are all actions that allegedly exacerbated the pandemic's impact on Missouri, but then also, folks, on the United States as a whole and the entire world. This stuff is absolutely mind-blowing to me when I was reading through this. Unbelievable. I didn't even know that you could, as a state, sue another country, basically. And we'll get into that in a little bit on some of the, skepticism on how they're going to, acquire this judgment of $24.5 billion. But, they found out that the first case was confirmed in December 2019, hence why we call it COVID-19. And the CCP knew of the human transmission of COVID back in September 2019. So a few months prior. And how did they know this? Well, there was a ton of whistleblowers and doctors, and guess what? Communist regimes, they'll do what they do best. Silence doctors, whistleblowers of all these facts. They quarantine medical staff that were suffering from these symptoms early in the pandemic before it was even deemed a pandemic in secrecy, and then denied everything until late 2020. So intentional or not, that is not the point. The point is this huge cover-up makes it very, very suspicious. And how they came up with this bombshell judgment of $24.5 billion is just basically a combination of, quote, $8 billion in PPE losses for Missouri alone, which then there was price increases in PPE costs. They had tons of losses in tax revenue, which I'm sure they could calculate. And who knows how they put a number on the countless and needless deaths within the state of Missouri, the United States, and the world as a whole. So the bill is pretty big, in my opinion, and it's really fucked up. And I really am just curious how this is going to move forward. What is this potential number in regards to damages with the states and the world? They need to be held responsible. Again, intentional or not. But regardless, these accusations within this case now confirm, and we need to hold China accountable. And I've never been more comfortable, even though it's a little rocky right now, that we actually do have a president and an administration that really does want to take it to them. And they're doing a lot of damage that's not being reported in the mainstream media on what is going on within the Chinese economy right now. I'll save that for another episode. So, back to the case. Judgment has been placed. Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, he is the cover of this episode, he is actively going to pursue Chinese-owned land and other assets in Missouri. But it's not really limited to. So, they are going to acquire. We've heard about this, how the Chinese has been purchasing land, more specifically near military bases, which we'll get into in a bit. But it's just crazy how we allow it. But this also is slightly a hiccup, right? Even though Mr. Bailey is targeting specific Chinese entities like the People's Republic of China, CCP, Wuhan Institute, etc., that long list that's the defendants, this lawsuit was initiated actually back in 2020. And so Attorney General Eric Schmidt started that, and then Bailey brought it back. So he brought this back. He's going to try to seize these Chinese-owned assets after the ruling has stand, and I'm going to get into the details on why it got brought back and some of the nitty-gritty details of this case that make it very, very interesting. But the fact of the matter is, no matter which side you're on, this is nonpartisan in my opinion, and people are just very interesting to me. If there's anything that even remotely slightly leans towards Trump being correct about something, it's like all the skepticism and alarms go off, or it's like they just don't want to see these things. Like those orange man bad shades really stay on and block you from seeing some potentially dangerous and, our national security interests are just absolutely mind-boggling. If I were to transport you, if you're skeptical of these Chinese-owned assets and these farmlands, and they're all conveniently near our military, if I were to wave a magic wand and make you a governor, make you the president, governor, make you a senator, congressman, do you just think in your mind that there's never a time throughout history and there's never a chance in our country that spies from an enemy country, which last time I checked, I don't think China is our best friend or our ally whatsoever. Do you think that's just impossible, that it would never happen? And if you do think it could potentially happen, what exactly would be the safeguards that you would put in place? And I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying I know for a fact that we have specifically the CCP sending spies to come and acquire land near military bases and spy on us, right? Sounds really conspiracy theory realm, right? But in all honesty, we have to have some type of safeguard and some type of checks and balances. And so with this Attorney General, Mr. Bailey, if he's going to go and seize and acquire these assets that add up to the huge judgment that just got ruled, I would say, you have to be thorough about this. And I'm sure the CCP covers their tracks because they do not play by the rules whatsoever, and they don't give a shit about their people. But moving forward from that, you have to do the utmost due diligence, because I'm totally against, straight up legal immigrants, American Chinese individuals buying land and building their own companies and empires. Like, that's totally fine if you start it from the ground up and you do it the American way and you're boosting our economy, etc. I don't think it's fair just to crack down on anyone who's Chinese for the sake of them being Chinese. But they better be thorough. And if there's any holes in how they acquire this land, and there's anything that even remotely connects to the CCP, then I'm all for it. I cannot believe it's even being accepted, to be honest. Or if it isn't really accepted, how exactly have they been, monitoring and checking this, And the good news is Mr. Bailey emphasized that the assets don't need to technically be located in Missouri. It could be acquired in all throughout the United States. So very interesting stuff. But again, even from just common sense, but also from a legal perspective, there's a lot of skepticism about this approach, because it's unclear whether the CCP directly owns these assets in Missouri or the country as a whole, as opposed to these Chinese individuals. And then additionally, enforcing this judgment, could be pretty complicated in regards to international legal principles and diplomatic considerations. As I said earlier, it's like I didn't even know that you could sue another country. And we're going to get into some specific legalities on how this all came about. And so, in a related move, Missouri government Missouri Governor Mike Parson issued Executive Order 24-01. Look it up. In January 2024. If you want it full word for word, you can access it. No problem, no biggie. I'm going to read it verbatim, this PDF. This executive order issued on January 2nd, 2024, directs the Missouri Department of Agriculture to implement emergency and proposed rulemaking concerning the acquisition of agricultural land by foreign individuals and entities. Okay, this seems like common sense stuff to me, right? We're implementing emergency and proposed rulemaking, right? Guidelines, safeguards when it comes to individuals acquiring and buying land in our country. We'll continue with the quote. Quote, it mandates that all proposed acquisitions by aliens or foreign businesses be submitted to the department before finalization to ensure compliance with state law and the order. The rules require the collection of specific information about the potential landowner and the intended use of the land. Additionally, the order prohibits the acquisition or ownership of Missouri agricultural land by individuals or entities associated with foreign adversaries, as listed in 15, if the land is located within 10 miles of a staffed military facility in Missouri. So the fact that this, end quote, the fact that this executive order was issued January 2nd, 2024, you would think this was already in play. Like this would be common sense lawmaking and rules and, just safeguards when we talk about associated foreign adversaries. And so I was like, okay, what is this list? This list of foreign adversaries, it's made by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Again, you can look this up. CFR 7.4, and this is the latest update. You can go look it up yourself. 15 CFR 791.4 are 1. The Republic of Cuba. 2. Islamic Republic of Iran. 3. Democratic People's Republic of Korea, aka North fucking Korea. 4. The Russian Federation. 5. Venezuelan politician Nicolas Maduro and that whole Maduro regime. We know that whole thing is sketch. And of course, who else is on there? The People's Republic of China. Okay? And so the CCP is included under this designation of the People's Republic of China. When I listed all those names that is on the defendant's side of this case, these adversaries are all included in one. They just blanket it with the People's Republic of China. You can get this list and very specific stuff. These are facts in 15 C.F.R.7.4. 15 C.F.R.7.4. You could look it up and read the list yourself. That was updated by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. So with that being said, this is all baked into the cake of this executive order that we are prohibiting the acquisition of this land if you fall under this category. So it's up to these individuals and Mr. Bailey, Attorney General, to do their due diligence and coming up with very, very substantial and irrefutable evidence that ties to the CCP. Okay? And so, when it comes to this, I will also put a little link on YouTube of the Electronic Code of Federal Regulations website. Okay, it just gives you a bit more information about all this. But essentially, in a nutshell, we're banning individuals and businesses from nations who are designated as foreign advisors, such as China, from purchasing land within a 10-mile radius. You would think this is common sense, and this order aims to safeguard Missouri's military and intelligence assets from potential security threats. Okay? And China doesn't give a shit. They're just kind of ignoring this ruling right now. They don't play by the rules. They're behaving the same way as if back in COVID when they got pushback and people were trying to investigate the origins of COVID-19. They're very uncooperative and they're very sneaky and snaky. And I just really don't understand why people are not interested in this case. All right. And so this is just an effort, to hold China accountable. But there's still these practical challenges, and I can't hammer home enough that in order for this judgment to be enforced and to take action like seizing assets, you got to come up with the evidence, okay? So back when the case was originally put together, I mentioned it earlier from the predecessor attorney general back in 2020, it was dismissed due to this specific act, the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. And this is where it's complicated when you start dealing with the foreign affairs on a state level and lawsuits, right? This act protects foreign governments from lawsuits. And it outlines specific exceptions, though, within this immunity. And this is how it got reemerged in March, right? So it was ducked away in 2020 due to this Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, the FSIA Act. But then this attorney general went in, used his skill and knowledge of lawfare, outlining this specific exception where this immunity does not apply. And so it was revived by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit. The court ruled that Missouri's claim regarding China's alleged hoarding of PPE fell under the FSIA's quote-unquote commercial activity exception, allowing that portion of the lawsuit to proceed. So voila, here we are again. The FSIA generally provides foreign states with immunity from lawsuits. However, it outlines specific exceptions where this immunity does not apply, and this one is going to be 28 U.S.C.1605A2. Look it up yourself. Here we go. Quote, under this exception, a foreign state is not immune from U.S. jurisdiction in which the action is based upon a commercial activity carried on in the United States by the foreign state, or upon an act performed in the United States in connection with a commercial activity of the foreign state elsewhere, or upon an act outside the territory of the United States in connection with a commercial activity of the foreign state elsewhere, and that act causes direct effect in the United States, end quote. So this provision opens the door for legal action against the CCP when their quote-unquote commercial activities have direct impact with the United States. Okay? So in the case of Missouri versus the People's Republic of China, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals examined several claims by Missouri relating to the COVID-19 pandemic against China. The court determined that most claims were barred from this immunity. However, it identified one specific claim that fell under this commercial activity exception, and it's count four, alleging that China hoarded PPE during the early stages of the pandemic. And the court reasoned that, quote, taking over mask-producing factories and buying up substantial portions of the world's supply of PPE are actions of a quote-unquote private player in the market, end quote. And so they're behaving as a private entity, right? This is how the court is looking at it. Like, okay, you are literally taking over the mass-producing factories and buying up a huge supply of this PPE equipment. You're now behaving as if you are a private citizen doing capitalistic stuff. You are not protected as some government entity anymore. And furthermore, it noted that such actions had that direct effect on the United States, particularly in Missouri. And this contributed to PPE shortages. Now, whether or not they proved that this was done, with malintent, like this is some type of biochemical warfare, that's not what I'm stating. What I'm stating is if this is true, that they did purchase en masse mask-producing factories and bought up huge portions of the PPE supply and not allowing that to hit the marketplace in the United States, I could see why this interpretation by Missouri claiming that the PPE was being hoarded proceeds under the FSIA's commercial activity exception. So here we are with it going forward. So these are just some interesting things that I read and dug up within this case. It's still ongoing. Again, my biggest concern, I'll repeat, it's a very symbolic and revealing ruling, but we still have enforcement challenges, so we have to sit tight. Despite this judgment, we got the challenges, right? And the Chinese government, first and foremost, is dismissing this lawsuit as baseless, of course. Why would they admit it? And they have not participated in any of the legal proceedings. In response to the judgment, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs warned of potential reciprocal countermeasures if the state's actions impact Chinese interests. So not only are they not showing up and just dismissing this entire case altogether, they're now threatening some countermeasures. It's just, how many red flags do we need? How many holes and inconsistencies need to be presented for us to finally screw our heads on and realize that these guys are being bastards to us? And I'm not saying the Chinese people in general. It is clearly the government, the CCP. That is the issue here. And so, why is this not mainstream news? What are my thoughts on it as a whole? Hopefully I gave you plenty of that, but this is a non-partisan issue. I mean, this should be bipartisan. Like, we should be concerned about these land grabs by Chinese entities and just making sure that they're not connected to the CCP for whatever reason, that they're next to military bases. We should be concerned that they were taking over mass-producing factories and buying up substantial portions of the world's supply of PPE, suppressing information, silencing whistleblowers. These are all huge red flags that it came from the Wuhan lab, right? And that's all the Trump administration did. They updated the website. What is it? Propaganda, or is there some truth to it? And so my next episode, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break down the very specific bullet points. There's 5 of them that are from the website that Trump updated. And I'm going to get really, really detailed about what makes this lab theory much more credible than the goddamn, bat theory that it came and occurred naturally. There's a lot of holes in it. And I'll be as specific and detailed as possible. But it's just rulings like these and behavior like the CCP always seems to take part in. It just further and further pushes me that this shit really did leak from their lab. And even people like Jon Stewart was sniffing it out nice and early and caught all the criticism, and you got banned for even questioning it. It's like, what's the difference from the truth and a conspiracy theory? A conspiracy theory becomes a truth a few months down the road, or whatever that quote is, right? This is just another one of those examples. It really turns my head, and I really hope I didn't bore you on this episode. Again, it's just horrible Trump derangement syndrome in the worst cases possible, because this to me is very threatening and dangerous that a foreign adversary, as listed by our Secretary of Commerce, and pretty well known that China is not our ally, it's terrifying that we don't have these safeguards in place, that we need a Missouri executive order to be recently put into place to just make sure and check that they aren't just buying land willy-nilly next to our military bases. Remember all those fucking drones flying all over the place? Whatever happened to all that news? And no one is even bringing this up. No one is even talking about this case. You know why? Because then you start to confirm that the conspiracy theories aren't conspiracy theories. And it's insane. So I just have to ask you, really think about it. If you disagree with everything I said today, really think about why this isn't front and center on your algorithms, in your news articles, or on your TV from your quote-unquote news. Okay? I'm really, really hoping that other states take action the way Missouri did. And I am really, really interested in how this moves forward. Again, nothing but the utmost due diligence and evidence needs to be provided in seizing these Chinese-owned agricultural farmlands. And if that's all box checked, then hell, I think this is going to be a great route for us to really, really secure our nation and get to the bottom of what the fuck happened in 2020 with COVID-19. So stay tuned for my next episodes. I'm really going to be excited to dive into the lab leak theory. I already been geeking out, but I just want to organize it and put it together. But yeah, please like, share, subscribe, all that shit. And thank you for listening to me and the Travis Masterbone podcast. And I look forward to you tuning in next time. Farewell.